Welcome to IDD Talks. My name is Anastasia Lavrina. In this edition, we will have an expert joining from the United States of America. It's Ambassador Richard Hoagland, Security and Politics Program Chair, Caspian Policy Center. He's also a former U.S. co-chair of the OEC Minsk Group. Mr. Hoagland, warm welcome to our discussion.
My pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you so much. So under a new Trump administration, how do you anticipate the U.S. will prioritize its strategy in the Caspian region, particularly in terms of its economic and security interests?
I think it's a little bit too early to tell in this administration because President-elect Trump is still choosing people for his cabinet and for the most senior positions. I am cautiously optimistic about the name for Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. He has a solid background, and I think he will be helpful. But whether there will be a special attention paid to the Caspian Sea countries, including Azerbaijan, Central Asia, still remains to be seen. The one thing that they probably, no matter what administration, would pay attention to is the increasing need for what are called rare earth minerals or special minerals, and also for energy issues. So, again, it's too early to try to predict what they might do, but those are some of the issues they would pay attention to, no matter who is in charge.
Mr. Hoagland, what role does the Caspian region play in a broader U.S. strategy towards Central Asia and Eurasia? How might this evolve under the new administration?
Again, a little bit too early to tell, but I can comment on how I hope it would evolve and what would be logical. And that is, over the past decade, what has been called the C5+1, which often includes Azerbaijan, so it's really a C6 these days, has grown. And in fact, President Biden met with the leaders of the C5+1 during the most recent UN General Assembly. So my hope would be that the C5 will continue to grow, that it'll look for ways to make itself a little bit more permanent rather than just a name on paper. So that would be very, very helpful because whenever there is a group of nations, they maintain their individuality, they maintain their independence, but when they work together, they can work against stronger powers like the neighbors Russia, China, even Iran, and difficult partners like Azerbaijan. So let's hope that this idea of the C5 grows, becomes C6, and then perhaps C8, the Caspian Sea region.
Well, you already practically answered my next question partially, but how would you expect the U.S. relations with key Caspian countries such as Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan, Kazakhstan under Trump's administration, and would also possible to know your opinion about the expectations from the relations between the United States of America and Iran, which is not quite easy, we can say even complicated.
Well, we have just gone through a crisis with Iran, and let's say thank God that it was handled reasonably on both sides. And so both sides have stepped back from that. I think there are always going to be these crisis periods, but let's hope that the leadership in both capitals, in Washington, D.C., and in Tehran, play a safe and reasonable game when they're doing these things back and forth. Now, the other countries in the region that need to take special steps, you mentioned Turkmenistan. I'm going to comment on that because for quite a long time, there's been the concept of a trans-Caspian pipeline to get Central Asian natural gas flowing through Azerbaijan into Central Europe and on into Western Europe. In principle, Turkmenistan says they're in favor of it, but what this needs is someone from the outside to step in as happened back in the late 1990s when the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline was first built. And that was pushed very hard by Washington, and it was accomplished. I think we need an outside push this time for Trans-Caspian. Now, some people will say, oh, but we're moving into green energy. We don't want to use dirty energy anymore. Well, in the future, moving into the future, that will be true, but I would think we probably have at least another generation and a generation, let's say 20, 25 years of using things like natural gas. So it really would be helpful if this could be built.
Well, green energy transition, renewables, the topic which was actively discussed at COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, just recently. Even talking about the middle corridor, there was some agreements reached and discussed the possibilities to make this project greener with the new green initiatives. But it was also agreed that fossil fuels still needed for the countries to have a smooth green energy transition. What do you think on that?
I think that's very true. We're in a transition period in world history right now. Um, Look, if you go back to the early 20th century, natural gas and oil were the big things just coming onto the scene at that time. By the end of the 20th century, people were talking about green energy, meaning solar power, wind power, other things like that, even new things that are just under investigation at this point. Uh, it's a historic transition. Transitions take a long time and have unexpected setbacks. That's natural. And so we know that the transition to green energy is still going to take a long time. In the meantime, people will need energy. Where will that come from? Natural gas, maybe nuclear increasing, but still, it's a transition period. We can't go from A to Z in one big leap. We have to go through each of the letters to get there.
Mr. Hoagland, global geopolitical shifts. We cannot ignore the fact that in the Caspian region there is also the interest of the global powers like China and Russia. Therefore, the future administration under the Trump's presidency, how do you think the United States will manage and balance its presence in the region, taking into account the interests of other superpowers?
Over the past decade at least, people have been talking about the middle corridor, and that is to move goods and people from China through Central Asia, across the Caspian Sea, through Azerbaijan, and onward into Europe. The United States does not do hard infrastructure projects usually. That's very rare for us. But what we do, and we're very good at, and what we're involved in right now, is what we can call soft infrastructure. It's putting together simplified tariffs and other kinds of understandings between the countries to make sure that the middle corridor things move very, very smoothly along this and very quickly. I am absolutely certain because we're already involved in this, we will stay involved in this and probably push it up a little bit under the next presidential administration.
And my last question, will the Trump administration prioritize strengthening military and defense cooperation with the Caspian countries?
Defense cooperation. Well, that is always a little bit of a sensitive question. We already have a program called Partnership for Peace, which we have relations with the militaries of each of the countries in the region. Now, whether that'll be increased or not, I sort of, my own personal view, I have no inside information, but I sort of doubt it, simply because the United States is going to have to pay military attention to other regions of the world where there are greater dangers. I think as long as things move reasonably, smoothly through your region, that we won't need to have a major increase in our military interest and presence.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today.
It was my great pleasure. Thank you so much for the invitation and all the best to you and your viewers.